Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Coker-Hook, and welcome back to this second segment discussing cybersecurity. With me again is Ron Hemingway, who's the President CEO of Cyber Bodyguards, Inc., here out of the San Francisco Bay Area. Ron, thanks for sticking around and coming back for another show here at Reference Point, because we're into some really interesting stuff.
It's a never-ending. It seems like a topic that everybody wants to hear about these days.
I think that's
it's the top of the news, and it's hitting home. And I think our last conversation we were talking about how is it affecting us at home?
Yeah.
And we are seeing it. We're seeing more devices. You can control your heating and air conditioning. It's not just a garage door anymore. It's multiple devices. You can do it anywhere using the connections through the internet. You also see where there's also concern. You have these baby monitors that are being breached.
That's a big deal.
Next thing you know, somebody's talking and they're in the, you've got a video camera along with audio from some stranger watching you. Not only are they watching you in your home, but they're talking to you and communicating to you live in home. And obviously there's some simple things that you can do. The manufacturer suggests right off the bat, change the password.
Right.
But it should be a concern. Your electrical device is still accessible. I
read something just today from Samsung. They were talking about how their newest TVs, if you have it in voice mode where you can control it via voice, it might be recording whatever it is that you say, as well as taking the voice command, channel 16 or whatever it is. I thought that was rather intriguing.
Internet capable. Is everything that's internet capable? Beware. Beware of you have to safeguard it just like you would your computer.
Right.
We have, obviously the younger generation is more computer savvy than, the past.
Right.
And they're growing up with the computers. So they're using it like a tool.
But that's an interesting thing. That the utilization of it is one thing. The familiarity to know what it is and how to operate it is one thing. But to understand what the ramifications of the information that it's transported via this mechanism, that's a whole other area. And I don't know that that's the sort of thing that's being discussed, talked about. There aren't classes on that in school, in high school anyway. So what do you do?
Well, I think that's one of those comes back to parenting. People as parents, you need to sit down with your children and have that conversation and let them understand that the information that you voice on the internet is going to be there. It's going to live long beyond what you think that instant second is. Mm-hmm. And it could come back to bite you later on in life. And those values that your parents are teaching you, and the parents need to take control of that. It's extremely important. I have 20-some nieces and nephews, and I've watched them. I've had to actually scold a few of them when they're out there communicating on their Facebooks,
mm-hmm.
Not realizing that what you're telling your friend, your grandmother sees, and it's offensive.
Yeah.
And so you need to check yourself. If your parents won't remind you, your uncle will. And that's basically, I've actually experienced that, and they've actually corrected it. But it's very imperative that they understand that information lives on.
Let me go back to ask a question about something you just said. You said that they corrected it. If you've put something up online, we talked about this earlier in the last segment. Once the data is out there, it's out there. So if you're putting something up on Facebook, a picture, a comment, whatever, and you decide you want to erase that, that doesn't mean that that the digital footprint is gone for that, does it?
No. The very first rule of information technology is to protect it. And that's what we make our living on, is protecting information. Well, the very first thing we do whenever we have a server up and running is we create a backup. So if it's communicating with you and I, or communicating through a server, believe me, somebody's backing it up.
Yeah.
If you're going through the internet, you're being backed up somewhere. Somebody's logging that information, that traffic, that particular conversation, and it's backing up. So all your social media sites, they actually make a great living off of having that information available for their consumers.
Oh, well, sure, because they can parse out the data and they can sell to
absolutely
all sorts of.
They'll run all kinds of programs looking for, again, it goes back to the basics of human behavior. Who uses the devices? We do. We're humans. We're the animal. We're a human animal, and we're going to be subjected to the same subjects, and whether we're using electrical communication or we're doing it in person, we need to be addressing the moralities of what we're saying and how we're saying it. The information that we use and say is going to come back and haunt us. And we have to be aware of that, especially when you're trying to help raise children in this environment.
Right.
they have to understand that that information will live on into their high school, college, professional lives,
Right.
and it may come back to haunt them one day when they said something inappropriate, in adolescence, as many of us have.
Right.
But it's living on forever. They
Yeah,
have a
it is.
backup of it.
I mean, when I was in high school, the internet didn't exist, right? So you said something stupid to someone, and unless it's that individual that remembers back however many years ago that you and he or she had a bit of a confrontation, nobody knows.
No.
But it's not that way anymore. If it's in the cyber world, if you're doing anything in the cyber world, it's going to be retained, is what you're saying.
Well, we see it in the news constantly. It's a reminder constantly. Morality goes throughout all of the areas of our lives.
Right.
We see it in the news with all the events that are happening. Peace enforcers, all the police officers out there are starting to realize really quickly that, the camera function on a cell phone is destroying their profession if they're not cautious.
Right.
They have to answer back to the individuals.
Right.
You're seeing it on the news every day. And this is all supported by the internet. It's a good thing. It's checks and balances. You have to make sure you're checking what you're doing, how you're doing it. Yeah. And again, it goes back to some of those basic principles they teach you in ethics. Say what you're going to say, but you say it in front of your parents.
Right.
You know?
I think one of the things to kind of just make a statement here relative to what we're talking about is that we're not trying to say in our discussions here that the internet is in and of itself something that is not useful, it's not good, it's a bad thing. What we're talking about is how do you, as a business, as an individual, how do you safeguard the information that you are entrusted with to be able to operate in whatever your business is, or as an individual, whatever you want to maintain for your own privacy and stuff like that. And that's a different question, because that's the same problem that even without the internet, you've had those kinds of problems. What do you keep? This is a family matter, or whatever it happens to be. You don't go out and shouting it from the rooftops necessarily. I want to get back to this conversation about the Internet of Things that we started at the end of the last segment, because there's a major push on everything from, we're going to be able to monitor the for irrigation purposes, the moisture content in the ground, to as you and I talked about it before one of the shows, being able to insert a technology chip into clothing or whatever, so you can track it and you know where it was made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. General Electric has its jet engines constantly monitored via some sort of IoT thing. So what do we have to be thinking about as a culture, as a business owner, as a consumer? What do we have to be thinking about as we start to engage and employ this new technology?
Well, the best approach is to look at the technology. What are the moving parts of the technology? I did a contract not too long ago for a company that was a healthcare company, and it was an oncology department. Many devices that I was unfamiliar with, but they were computer-related devices. They were, X-ray machines, not realizing the imaging that they were capturing. How were they capturing it? Mm-hmm. Were they vulnerable? And this was one of the things that I started drilling into with their actual file structures. Were there vulnerabilities that were known to exist with the storage of this particular image? And with those vulnerabilities, were they being safeguarded? Were you aware of them? And what are the safeguards that you're taking?
When you say, were there vulnerabilities with regard to the information, are you talking about how the information was stored and maintained, or how it was captured, or both? Or
both. It's actually both, because what happens is with an image file, there is a capability of introducing malware into an image file.
Really?
And with that image, say for example, I take an X-ray of an individual and it's a file. So with that file, you can introduce malware into that file, and now it can be transported around. So you could actually use the oncology department of the hospital to transmit a malware into the system.
Oh, wow.
So when you're looking at the recent breach we were talking about with Anthem, you don't know where it came about. The actual malware, the Trojan that was launched that started scouring and allowing them to retrieve data, could have been introduced simply because there was an image file that had a malware introduced into the image, and it was just brought on as a regular X-ray, and the technicians just looked at it as a regular file, not realizing, the process itself allowed for this possible breach.
Right. Yeah. So, is there a way, since so many of our devices these days are electronic, are tied to the internet? I mean, you even tell us you want to save all of your data in cloud storage now and back up and all that, everything like that. But is there a way to, at that point of the development of the item itself, the device itself, to put in a layer of protection that could inhibit this kind of problem?
The GS1, as I was speaking to in the last segment, it's actually one of the organizations, the world-renowned organization, that's trying to take steps and measures to actually do that. They want to prevent or create some kind of a genetic code, say, for lack of better terms. They want to have some kind of a DNA for all devices that are all electrical components that are meant or married together to form one kind of a component. So if you have a computer, it's made up of many circuit boards, many chips. Those chips are all manufactured by various vendors throughout the world. We know this, so we have to have a way of checking that. Now, when they started the plug and play, they started putting little bits of that identifier on the front end of the chip, identifying the manufacturer, the make and model, so that they could in fact call up for the drivers a program that would allow it to work. Well, now they're trying to take it one step further. They're looking into identifying, putting a tamper-resistant memory chip on board all devices that they are able to identify through a unique identifier, so that they can in fact validate that the source of the chip was in fact the person that said that they were supposed to be manufacturing it. And that'll allow us to have another tracking mechanism. Some of the merchants that are really interested in this are trying to prevent bootlegged apparel.
Right, sure.
They're trying to introduce, tamper-resistant RFID chips so that they can validate that, say, the purse that you purchase is in fact a Louis Vuitton. It's not a knockoff. It'll have a chip that authenticates that it actually was manufactured.
Does this create the opportunity to prevent the kind of breach that we've talked about earlier?
And the reason it is you're going back to the point of origin. You're trying to identify how all the components of the electrical component marry together to form one component. So you have an iPhone. It's made up of many chips. Are all the chips accounted for validation? Are they in fact originally coming from the manufacturer that is approved? Are the safety measures in place to prevent a malware from being introduced at that manufacturer? And therefore, when they get to the manufacturer, the main place where they assemble it, they are all in fact validated from the manufacturers of origin. So now you have this particular phone that's a composition of many manufacturers. All the devices, components have been authenticated so that they come there and you know that they're going to be working properly and that they've been cleared. And then now you have the phone that's out there that's constructed of all these authenticated. And at the same time, we can utilize that chip that's built into the phone to also authenticate you as the user, the phone. So when you pick up that phone, that unique identifier that came with that phone should be tied to you. And there's ways they're using biometrics with the iPhone currently. That's one of the ways, using two-factor authentication, so it's not just your fingerprint, but it's also a code, along with the additional identifier that's actually the chip that's tamper-resistant inside the phone itself.
So does that create a layer of protection for someone trying to come in from the outside, is what you're saying?
Absolutely, because you could set up a layer of trust based on that model alone. And this is one of the models that I've been looking into in the last couple of years, doing some really serious research into utilizing and leveraging that tamper-resistant memory chip and authenticating at the device layer, not waiting for the actual actor to compromise it, and utilizing and leveraging what we know to be in existence, the cloud, the actual internet, as a vehicle to actually provide us communication to authenticate. So we have the ability to look at that device, know that that chip is in fact you, check you, make sure that you have the authentication mechanism so that when something is going to try to access your device, say it's for a corporate network, that network could be closed. It used to be closed. It's wide open now. If in fact we identify all the devices within the corporate infrastructure leveraging this tamper-resistant memory ID, we in fact could validate the access to the network by the device, not just necessarily by the user. and we can raise the lever raise the level of protection by asking for another mechanism, biometrics or user ID, something that says not only are you dialing in, but we also know that the device is okay. It's
a legitimate device. Okay, so that tells me that there's a lot of thought been going into this, and that there is some motion in the direction of coming up with physical mechanisms and human activated mechanisms to add this layer of protection. But we don't really have that in place today.
No, we don't.
So what I'd like to talk about in the time we have remaining here, for the next 10, 15, 12 minutes or so, what do I do as me to protect myself, my family, my business from the kind of potential problems, and is it enough?
I think the first step, the old rule of thumb in protecting information right off the bat. Rule 1, back up your information. Rule 2, store it. If you're going to store private information on your laptop, your desktop, encrypt it. Control that, put it into a state that is non-legible for anybody except yourself. And that buys you a level of protection right there. The other is if you don't want to have use of encryption, take it offline. Put it on a drive. Take it off of your computer. Don't allow it to be on there while you're not there, and store it in a safe environment. That allows you to, when I traveled, I used to travel quite a bit for business, and when I would travel, my hard drive was always encrypted. It was considered to me to be disposable. If anybody stole or took that device, it was useless to them. They could hack the password, they could get into the operating system, but the actual information that was stored on it was always encrypted. And most people that are traveling today use that method to store information on any transportable device. They use encryption as their first level of defense.
Is that something that you have to do on a file-by-file basis? How does that work?
No, you can do full disk encryption. Matter of fact, and most organizations and most corporations that have employees that are traveling, it's usually a policy. It's mandated now.
Well, let's talk about that just a little bit, because a lot of the people here in our area are entrepreneurs. So they might be a consultant or an independent operator, a CPA, whatever it happens to be. Okay, and they're traveling all the time with their iPads or their Surface Pro 3s or whatever they're traveling with that has all this information accessible. Some of it's in the cloud, some of it's on their device. So this encryption concept, it's not something that comes with the capability is not coming directly when you buy the device. It's not like something that's already preloaded that you can just say turn it on. You have to buy.
No, you'd have to buy an application in order to do it, but there are several applications available. I don't want to single out any one particular application, but there are several applications out there. What you're going to be looking for is two key things in protecting your information. One is a good backup system. I cannot stress that enough. And then the second is a full disk encryption application. So what you do is you encrypt the entire piece of information. All your hard drive is encrypted and is protected, and you're backing it up on a regular basis. And many devices have automated features where you can actually orchestrate a backup remotely into the cloud. As long as you're encrypting it, you're protecting that information as well. So you're backing up an encrypted file, and you're protecting it. And you have to use that and leverage that to your advantage. Again, you have to look at what you have as being disposable. If you lose that laptop or it's destroyed, are you protected? Can you ensure that the information that was contained in there is protected from outside eyes, for a need-to-know basis?
Okay, so that answers the question relative to my devices, my computers, iPads, whatever. But now I've got in my home, I've got Nest or one of these things, the digital thermostat or the digital door lock or the baby monitors, the things that I can, the cameras I can look in and say, oh, my puppy's playing, all right? So, which is a big thing. Everybody's talking about that, and a lot of people are beginning to embrace that kind of technology. What do I do as me to protect myself from intrusion at that level?
Right off the bat, as soon as you acquire an electrical device that you're going to use and introduce it into your home environment, jump on Google and Google that device, known vulnerabilities. Look at that to find out or identify before you actually purchase it. If you're looking to purchase something, go out and find out what are the vulnerabilities of it. Identify with those before you make that decision. And then once you do make that decision, be sure that for every vulnerability you have thought about a safeguard to protect against that. You know, like we were talking about the baby monitor, one of the quickest fixes was just to change the password. Again, if you change it to a simple password, expect a simple answer.
Right.
You know, it's going to be compromised pretty simple. So make yourself educated. Understand, you know, it's really simple. You know, the internet has provided us with the tools to find out all this information rather quickly. I love Google for that. You know, it's just a matter of a few seconds and type in the information, ask for vulnerabilities, and then look at it. That's what I do. That's what most of the professionals that I work with. You're not going to learn and memorize all the devices,
right.
but you have to take it on a device by device standard. If you're going to be doing work in this industry, that's one of the first things that you have to learn is no two environments are the same, and you have to really address every device.
So that's true for my smartphone. That's
Absolutely.
true for my car.
Everything.
That's true for my Bluetooth headset.
There's always a vulnerability associated with just about anything. As soon as you say Bluetooth, it immediately, you know, pulls the hair up in the back of my head as far as a security guy, because it's a broadcasting, you know, protocol, and therefore it's going to allow itself subject to vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, and know the limitations, know what the manufacturer has implemented as safeguards.
Smartphones now, you can make it a mobile hotspot and connect to the internet and stuff like that off of that. So
it's nice to share hacking sites with everybody as they're sitting at the local Starbucks.
Yeah.
You know, people realize that too. If you don't have that secure, that hotspot is a hotspot. It's a hotspot for somebody to commit a cyber crime.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So I'm a traveler. I'm a business traveler. I've got a laptop. I'm stopping at a Starbucks or someplace. I'm going to get something to eat. I got to do it. And if I've got my data encrypted, as you talked about, is my device protected, so no one can actually get, you know, if I'm accessing through the wireless connectivity at Starbucks, am I vulnerable even though I've got the encrypted hard drive?
Yes.
Yes.
Because as soon as you access it, you unlock the data. And once you unlock the data, the device could be intercepted. Somebody could actually hijack your device without your knowledge from a hotspot. So you always have to be aware of the fact that, you know, when you're dialing in through or utilizing a public Wi-Fi, make sure that you have security tools that are watching out and trying to establish some kind of a secure connection. You know, using VPN connectivity. You know, at least you've reduced the possibility of vulnerabilities. Even
at personal networks at your home, you know, the Comcast and various and sundry others, Verizon, are all, you have the wireless network in your home, okay? And it doesn't stop in the living room, you know, because that stuff that reaches out, you can have that connectivity for hundreds of feet around you.
Oh, definitely. And believe me, the youth of today know all these tools. They're as easily available. They're some of the best in the, you know, it used to be it was limited to technicians.
Yeah.
It's not anymore. Now it's applications. You don't have to have a special device to eavesdrop on anybody's, you know, open Wi-Fi.
So how do you protect your home Wi-Fi?
Well, right off the bat, you should look at the vulnerabilities that are associated with you. You should ask your ISP, your service provider, as to what are available to you from them as to their personal protection measures. They have antivirus, anti-malware. They have firewall functionality. There's ways. Immediately, always at least have a password. Don't just leave it as the default password. Always change the default password. I personally never trust the technician. Always change the password. You know, learn how to do that yourself from the technician upon installation. It's a great thing to have the knowledge to know how to do that, so that you can actually change it. So that when they leave, you change it. It's something that you know and you recognize, and keep it in a secured spot. Don't put it underneath the laptop or something so that anybody can see it. Mm-hmm. You know, because I know a lot of them with the existence of, you know, your home internet connectivity. A lot of them are now using, you know, the actual labels that are coming off of the device.
Right.
Again, change it.
let me ask you another question here, because we have so many devices, you have so many websites that you go into, and everybody wants a password to get in. And so if I'm trying to remember or write down a list of, here's the 600 passwords that I have, and it's sitting on my desk, but trying to remember all that stuff. Is there a smart way to deal with that level of security in terms of what you're going to do? Is there like how do you go through protect all that stuff without having to have dozens of different passwords memorized?
Well, there are ways that you obviously want to have different passwords. You don't want to have the same password. You want to change them frequently. And
you want to have a different one for every location, every
You don't
website?
want to have, definitely for different locations. It depends on what your job function is. If you're dealing with multiple servers, different locations, different users, I would suggest it. If you're a security professional traveling and helping people, you want to have different access passwords for all the devices that you access into it. You can get a password vault where you can actually store it. Basically, it's the equivalent of a virtual vault.
Oh,
where you can store the information in it, so you can look it up.
Cool.
That's one way, and it's encrypted, so it protects at that level. The other way that you can do it is we've obviously, the industry is really pushing quite a bit on use of different methodologies for password protections. We're looking at ways to leverage the tamper-resistant memory chip ID that I was speaking to earlier.
Right.
We're also looking at biometrics, some of the things right as soon as you release.
There are some options. I have to cut you off here because I just got the signal that we've got maybe 45 seconds left before I have to say goodbye to people. This has been great, Ron. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot. I hope the people who will watch this show are going to get some of this information. And remember, if you have questions about this subject matter, send them to me at info@referencepointtv.com. I'll make sure that Ron gets that data. We'll try to answer your questions. Maybe, and his website, your website's, been noted up there if anybody has some particular queries or questions about this. So, thanks, Ron, for coming.
Well, thanks,
for
Dave.
this.
I
This
appreciate
has been
it.
great, and I appreciate the fact that you did this. And we may have some follow-up conversations moving forward on this. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us here, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.